Adversity comes at us from lots of different angles. Sometimes we're expecting, and other times we are not. How do you overcome adversity when there is immense grief involved? It is a question that my next guest had to come to terms with and invent ways of moving through. Pregnancy is supposed to be a time of joy. There is little joy in finding out you will be giving birth to a child who has already died. There is no easy way to put it. And there is no easy way to move through that grief. Veena Chowdhury, I honour you for sharing your touching story today. And a warning for listeners who have lost a child during or shortly after their pregnancy. Veena is very open and transparent, and some parts of this interview may upset you, and yet I've left them in because I feel that this story is so important to share honestly. Sometimes in the midst of our deepest grief, it is important to hear other people's grief as well. You are not alone. There are many of us who feel and understand that pain. And sometimes, just sometimes, it is that knowledge that you are not alone that can help us to get through the adversity. I bring you Veena Chowdhury.
Have you ever had one of those gut-wrenching moments where life ground you to your knees and you found yourself asking in despair, why me? This podcast is all about sharing your stories and journeys, from asking why me to declaring this is why me. Discover how ordinary human beings like you and I have found their extraordinary levels of hope, courage, compassion, and provided a new perspective for greater potential and self-empowerment during their darkest defining moment. As a creative artist and coach myself, my guests and I discuss the interconnectedness of emotion and transformation in those moments, and how their actions then seize the opportunity for discovering their unfiltered and authentic voice, and ultimately their life's purpose. I invite you to join me each week as we share insights into how adversity can be turned into a unique advantage. Today's guest is Veena Chowdhury. Veena and I met in the KBB community where we joined an impromptu Zoom call a few months ago and connected immediately. Today, Veena shared a quote that is especially fitting of both that conversation and I feel the conversation we're about to have. And she talked about the profound impact this quote had on her. It was from President Mandela. As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison. And in response, I now partially quote Veena herself. We can mitigate our own suffering by being kinder to ourselves, by recognizing when we have redirected our brain, when we have course corrected from feeling sorry for ourselves, and when we have practiced the values of forgiveness, kindness, and compassion towards ourselves and those that trespass against us. A daily practice. It's not pretty. It need not be. I don't care how you show up, as long as you do. Welcome to the WhyMe podcast, Veena.
Thank you so much, Vera. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, it's an absolute delight to have you on. And well, let's get into your story, Veena. How about you explain to our listeners your WhyMe moment, that moment that was a defining time in your life where you knew that something needed to change?
I had a very rough childhood, and things were just really difficult. I had narcissistic family. We were in a joint family. There were economic challenges. And then, we were in one of those situations where, we were sort of in the upper crust sort of India. And but at home, it was, life was just miserable. And there were so many challenges, including financial. And so it was kind of a very bipolar circumstance where you just had this pretense, but everything was just awful at home. And I thought that, oh my gosh, I need to get out of here. And if I make my life, and education's the only way out, and I've got to change the circumstances. I left, I got a professional degree. I graduated and became a pharmacist. And then I moved from India to the United States. I came to a small town here in the Midwest and went to graduate school. And, I was kind of figuring my way out, in the world, kind of just one step at a time. I had met my now ex-husband, but, I had met him in pharmacy school, went back from graduate school, we got married, and then he joined me later. And a few years later, so he joined me here, had some challenges getting through school here himself, figuring his own life out. So it was a rough time as a, relatively poor graduate student. We were blessed, but we were grad students. There wasn't much to go around, but we were safe and we were well, and that was amazing. At the time, though, of course, it feels, oh my gosh, is this going to end? And, when you're in a PhD program, it feels like that there is no end sometimes. And that's how it did feel for a long time. I then had my first child and moved off campus. So, things basically, what I'm trying to say is nothing was a walk in the park. There was challenges every step of the way. The biggest moment for me, though, where kind of your knees kind of hit the floor type of situation was in 2010. And I was pregnant with my second child, 39 weeks and 2 days, and found out that she had no heartbeat. And so I now had to deliver this baby that was gone. Oh. It was a 15-hour labor. And I would say that with that experience, I was truly reborn. At that time, I didn't know it at the time, of course. I just could not understand how I was there. Yeah. I actually did say the words, why me? I literally, as soon as I found out, in that very moment, and then shortly after it became, what did I do? Or what happened? What went wrong? And very quickly after, so this was within a span of like 30 minutes, I kind of had to just come to terms with where I was in the situation and make some medical decisions like, okay, what do I need to do here? What do I need to make arrangements for, have my other daughter picked up, and there was all these practical things to do. And then they numbed me, with an epidural. And so I was here on this bed, and I had many, many hours to reflect on this moment that I'm in, these crossroads. And so for me, I would say that was the point at which my life changed. And I really had to decide whether I was going to let this take me down or I was going to define it in a new or in a different way, as opposed to a story of pain and loss, which it most definitely was. But I had an older child, and my decision was that I was going to find my way through that pain. That was the biggest turning point for me.
Wow. Yeah. I can only imagine how difficult that moment would have been. How old was your other child at this time?
She was 4 years old.
4 years old. So old enough to know what's going on as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So How did you navigate through that? I mean, being in this situation, you've almost brought this baby to term and discovered that it's gone. How did you navigate that in that time? Because 15 hours is a very long time to have to go through a labour for a child that is gone.
Yes, it was. It was the longest day of my life. You know, I kept telling myself, one, if I can get through this, I can get through anything. Yes. I just remember even now, I just kept saying that if I can get through this day, then I can get through anything in life. Mm-hmm. I had been raised, you know, everything happens for a reason. And, you know, that often doesn't bring comfort, but it did for me because I believed in a friendly universe and I believed in a God that works for you. And I'm not particularly religious, but I do believe there is a higher power. And that's what I channeled at the time and reminded myself that, you know, and just for ease, you know, God, and, you know, as opposed to the universe or any of that, I just believe God had a plan and that there was a grander plan for me. And so I just kept reminding myself that, you know, everything happens for a reason. I may not see that reason right now, but there is a reason. And, you know, there was a part of me, the rational, medical, scientific part of me that kept saying, well, maybe she was really sick. And, you know, I just kept trying to, you know, my mind kept trying to find reasoning, not that sick people don't have the right to live or any, it was not any of that, but to my helpless, hapless, you know, the circumstance I was in, I was just trying to think, I was trying to rationalize. But there was this higher part of me that kind of said that, you know, you're just going to have to trust. You're just going to have to trust that this is where you are meant to be. This is what this baby's life was. And it was really interesting too. I've had 3 full-term pregnancies and hers was the easiest. Like it was the smoothest. It was a textbook pregnancy. I mean, there were, you know, even till that very day, people had mentioned just how good I looked, how healthy I looked, and how I was just working these 14-hour days. I was just doing everything that, and, you know, so it just didn't make any sense. Yeah. I asked for help. The nurses I had were extremely supportive. So I asked them if there was any kind of support the hospital had to offer, if there was anything of that kind. And they had a woman who kind of specialized with people who'd been through loss. And so she came on down. She spoke to me for a bit. And I just kept processing in my head that, you know, everything happens for a reason. I'm just going to have to trust. And that if I can get through this, then I can get through anything. And then at some point during the day, I shifted to, you know, that life is so short. Yeah. That we have no way of understanding or knowing when it's going to turn. Because here was this, again, textbook example. Everything was just going, I mean, I had this wonderful life. You know, it was a really good job. I had really good colleagues. I had this beautiful, healthy older child. I mean, everything was wonderful, you know, on the face of it. Yeah. And then here this had happened. And so I just had to, I think it woke me up. And it was a very, very, very expensive and painful wake up. And by expensive, I don't mean financial. I mean, just losing this child that, you know, was my hope and dream and all of this, just knowing she wouldn't experience life. So for me, it was just, okay, this child has not had a chance to live, but, you know, I have to live for her. And by that, I meant that I have to make the best of my life, you know, that I am breathing. This child did not get to experience that, but I am. And so I have to do the very best I can with my life and with this gift of life. So that's what got me through the day, knowing that there was this other child waiting for me, knowing that there was a reason that all of this was happening, and just trusting that I would see that reason on the other side of it.
Wow.
And
such powerful words, Veena, and such a powerful story. And so many of our listeners will be able to relate to this. Many women lose children from early on to, as you're saying, right at the end of term. And I can't imagine that it is any easier at any stage, and that grief that you would be feeling to have to then continue on with life. And I really love that you use the word trust. And trust is something that I help a lot of my clients to understand, that trust applies to our inner circle, it applies to the people around us, it applies to the people we ask for help. It also applies to trusting ourselves, that we know what we need to do and that we know what is best for us in those moments, and trusting in that process. Did you have anybody else that was questioning the way that you were dealing with? Because often that can be very difficult as well. People will offer their opinions and think that they're helping. Perhaps they're not. What was that like, navigating that afterwards?
Yes, for sure. I mean, medically, I elected to deliver deliver my baby vaginally, so a normal delivery, so-called, and as opposed to a C-section, which would have been over and done with within an hour. And I knew I just didn't want to layer on more healing, physical and painful healing over what I was already going through. Yeah. And so obviously that was hard for my mother and husband then who were with me to understand. But again, it's as you said, I knew that I knew the way out of this. It didn't make, if there was a way out, the only person that knew was me, is what I felt at that moment. And even medically, I just knew that this is how I'm going to go forward. But that was difficult. Subsequently, and keeping in mind that, we're an immigrant family here in the U.S., I have never lost anyone in my life. So I've never had to make funeral arrangements or do any of those things. So even those kind of practical things were really a brand new experience. Yeah. While just having delivered a baby, a full-term baby. So I'm physically exhausted and I have this other child. So there's all of this kind of going on in the background. So for me, right then I had decided that if I was to get through this, that I was just going to have to listen to me. Mm-hmm. That I was going to have to be in charge, and I was going to have to do what felt right to me. There were a lot of cultural things as well. I was raised Hindu, and, there were probably all these things I was supposed to be doing, but I just knew I was going to do whatever gave me peace, gave my family peace, and I was going to find ways to honor this life that lived for such a short time. And then this moment that I was in, that we all were in, but I had to think for myself at that moment. And that's what I did. And so I just made that decision, and I very kindly and gently expressed that. And I said, I understand there may be things we're supposed to be doing. I mean, there may be ways in which I'm supposed to process this, but I am going to do what feels right to me. And I would, really respect it and appreciate it if all of you honored that as well. Mm-hmm. And that's how I navigated that moment in my life. But yes, I don't think that there is subsequently, I went through, another life-changing experience, and, everyone came out of the woodworks to give me their advice on how I should handle it and how I was screwing my life up and how I was destroying it, or, had their own perspective of how I was navigating that life challenge, from their comfortable seats.
Yes.
Yeah. And my approach is, as Brene Brown says, if you're not in here fighting with me, then you don't get a vote.
Yes.
I will hear you, but
yes, I appreciate that too. And certainly I have discovered in very tough moments in my life that is when I realize how much strength I didn't know I had. And that internal warrior, I talk about our internal warrior or our inner warrior a lot. And sometimes we need to be in situations that life will have us in to have to pull on those reserves that we didn't know were there, and to gain that awareness. How did your inner warrior resurface at that other time, which I do know what you're talking about with that other experience? How did your inner warrior help you get through that as well?
I thought I had, honestly, I thought that I've lost a child. There can be nothing worse than this. I thought, okay, this is it. It's only uphill from here, and that's what I did think as I got through that experience of losing a child. But, waking up is, it's not passive. It was a cosmic 2x4, very big, hard cosmic 2x4 that woke me up. And what it did is it exposed to me how unconscious I was to so many things in my life. And, you started the podcast with the quotes, both from President Mandela and what I had written. And I had written that in context of exactly this. I think I had a little bit of our upcoming conversation in mind as I was writing that piece. And
sometimes in life we feel like, what else can go wrong? How many things do we need to suffer through in our life before things turn around? Before we get into the rest of Vena's story, I wanted to pause for a moment. As a single mum myself, I'd like to give a little shout out to all the single mums out there. Single parenting is hard. When you throw in different forms of adversity on top of that, it's even harder. And sometimes the immense financial pressures, the emotional pressure, the safety pressures, they get to you. And it's in those moments that we can really feel that separation from our tribe, from our people. So I implore each of you to reach out today to someone who you feel you can connect to, even if you simply be with them without saying much at all.
It's Vera-Lee from Australia, the founder of the WhyMe Movement and podcast. Well, one idea, one vision, one person. This self-funded podcast and movement has started to take a life of its own, which is exactly where I had planned it would be. To hear the stories of the far-reaching impact across many countries in this world, it humbles me to know that my vision is shared, understood, and positively influencing people to look at the changes they can make for their own adversity and how they can find the strength, the courage to be inspired and feel connected and empowered to use their adversity to their advantage. One of the best ways that you can help support the WhyMe Movement and podcast is to subscribe to the various channels, such as the podcast platform you are listening to this on now and the YouTube channel, which has much bonus content released. By subscribing, you will make sure that you are one of the first to find out who is coming up next, more about our guests, and the interesting questions that I ask them, which do not get released on the podcast platforms, and lots of other good bonus content. I always love reading your comments, and so please feel free to leave them on each of the platforms. The beauty of social media is that you can easily share single episodes or any of that bonus content from YouTube onto your own social media platform with your friends, which helps to bring this positive, inspiring message to far more people, allowing you to be an active participant in the WhyMe movement and vision. On Apple Podcasts, it always makes a big difference if you can leave a rating, review, and subscribe to the show. Let's get back to today's story.
What I had written then for everyone else is basically that the transition from victim to thriver, it's not linear. It's not a one and done. Every single day you have choices. It's a moment to moment choice of, am I going to be woe is me, I am the victim here, or am I going to make a different choice, recognizing that life is happening for me? And, I had made this decision to be aware, to be conscious of what I was doing in my life after I lost my child. But then I slipped back and I went into trying once again to keep the peace at home and keep things, keep things moving, make things work. Anytime we use that expression, I'm trying to make things work. You're not in alignment with your highest truth. You're not doing what is best for you. And it took me all of these experiences to realize that doing what is best for you is not selfish. It is actually the best thing you can do for the world, for your children, for the planet. Because if you're not able to honor the life within you, you can't give what you don't have, because you're not honoring all the other lives around you. You're not. And it took me a very long and circuitous route to get to that conclusion. But what it did is I realized how unhappy I was in my marriage. I realized the patterns of abuse and disrespect and so much more that was going on. And whenever I choose to talk about this, I want to make clear this has nothing to do with what my now ex-husband did. It just doesn't. That becomes irrelevant, because the decision I had made is that this is my life. Yeah. And I am going to decide how I show up for it. So then nothing else that happens around me matters, because all of that is just an opportunity for me to step into that survivor and then thriver role. And stepping out of a marriage that I'd been in for so long, where I had just conformed, the best analogy I can give you is I lived most of my life, bulk of my life, like water, where you just fit into the container you're put in. And so everywhere I went, I just adapted to whatever was needed in that moment. And I reached this crossroads and I had to say enough, that I'm done. I am not adapting. I am not fitting myself into a box. I am not trying to conform anymore, that this is who I am. This is how I want to live. And this is what is best for me. It was not easy. I had 2 living children at the time, and it was really, really difficult. And at the time, I remember saying a few times that, I've lost a child, but this is way more difficult. And now with, some years past, I'm able to understand why I said that. Is because when I lost my baby, I knew she was safe. I knew, that she is in the safe place. But here I was in this extremely uncertain situation. As an immigrant woman here in the US, I had to figure out the path. And my husband, he didn't take my position well.
Yeah.
is the best thing I can say. And
yeah.
things really went south. It was a very, very difficult divorce. It was, 2 restraining orders later, a difficult divorce, a custody battle. I mean, I went through hell and back many times over. And it was a choice every single moment to repeatedly say, this will not take me down. I will get through this. I do not know how right now. There was a point at which for about almost a year plus where I was literally trapped in the circumstance where, there was really no way out for me to get out of, it's one thing when you aren't aware that you're in an abusive relationship and you don't realize it's abuse. And then it changes completely when you understand that what is happening to you is abusive.
Yes.
So I was in that second part. And I remember laying awake and looking for hope. Just things were so bad. I couldn't read. I could not listen to anything. I couldn't watch anything. I mean, I was just going through life. I was working and it took all my energy to work and to parent. And I found Dr. Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And, in the book, he quotes Nietzsche and he says, he who has a why can live with any how.
Right.
And for 9 months, that's what I did. I just kept reminding myself day after day after day that I may be trapped here right this moment. I may not be able to see the end, but I know my why. And I am going to live with this how that I'm in right now, that this is not how my story is going to end. And that was something else I just kept repeating as well, that I will not be taken down. This is not how my story is going to end. And I will get through this.
And there's that trust again, trust again in yourself, trust in that intuitive feeling and that becoming aware of what abuse and domestic violence is and that it's been happening, because it is something that becomes a bit of a fog when you're in it. And it's not like it hits you like a ton of bricks. It creeps up on you. And the realization, like you said, it's that perspective, once you have that awareness, working out your why and knowing that you're still stuck in the how, it takes a lot of trust in the process and trust in yourself that you will get through this. And the other thing that I'm hearing too is that being the person who chooses to end that relationship. Now, this applies whether there's abuse or not, but it's particularly heightened when you're being abused and you're the one that stops that relationship and has to confront that person with this information and to remain as safe as you can and get out of that situation. It's not an easy task to do, and it does take a lot of planning. It takes a lot of trust in yourself and a lot of not falling into that self-doubt that inevitably always comes up. What would be your recommendation to women who have become aware and are stuck in their how?
It is my belief that if we are on this earth and if we are breathing, then our story isn't over. We may not always know how to glorify it. We may not always be in a book or a movie or a podcast or any of those things. But there is somebody who needs you. There is someone somewhere, whether it is your child, an aging parent, a friend. There is someone who loves you and wants to see you thrive. And that's who you sort of have to almost make front and center in your life in that moment. And you kind of have to pare it down to, you have to make it really simple. For me, it was my children, it was my mother, but it was also this absolute deep inherent knowing that my life had a purpose, that I am here on this earth and there is a story I am meant to tell, I am meant to live for. And so that all of these things were happening to me, around me, but they were also happening for me. And it took me some time after to quite put it that way. But you just have to look at the part of your life that is higher, because when you're in that abusive situation, you feel like you're at rock bottom and nothing makes sense. And WhyMe is so appropriate because you just really wonder how your life is where it is. I mean, I don't think there's a single child, no matter how abusive their childhood may have been, no matter how awful their life might have been, who just wakes up and says as an adult that I'm going to be in this relationship where I'm not going to be respected emotionally, physically, verbally, sexually, whatever it may be. Nobody chooses that. Right. And so there's a moment of reckoning of trying to come to terms with, okay, I'm here now. And then you just have to look at that part of your life that is higher. Like this part, you're living in fear in this domestic situation, and you kind of have to look towards the voice of love, and you have to let that pull you out. But you have to let that happen. You cannot resist that. And I think a lot about people in recovery, because the 12 steps, I mean, they really do help. They are sort of a guidebook for getting through life in some ways. And you just have to trust in that higher power. Again, like you said, you just have to believe. And, our brain is so powerful, right? It will do what we tell it to do. So there's two parts. You can choose the worst case scenario of what can happen to you, and you can believe in that. Or you can choose to believe that you are going to get out on the other side of this and that you are going to craft the life. Both of them are going to take equal amount of energy.
Yes.
It's going to take you the same amount of energy and creative abilities to imagine your worst case scenario as well as the best that is possible for you. And that's the choice we have to make, to choose to trust and believe that the path is through, and that on the other side, there is, you're going to make use of this life God has given you. Universe has given you, creation, whatever you want to call it. But that there is meaning in this suffering you're going through. And you just have to draw on that.
Yeah, that they're very powerful words, and it's very good advice to anyone in that situation. And I know from talking to many women who've been in similar situations, once they get that awareness, that is what helps them to work out how to plan. And I love the way that you've explained that the energy is the same, whether we're focusing on the worst case scenario or whether we're focusing on the best case scenario. And I've always advised people to look at what they can do in that situation. And if we just think of a mental picture for the moment, you've essentially got abuse coming at you from every possible direction. In a domestic violence relationship, there's the physical, the emotional, the financial, there's so many aspects of it, the emotional, the manipulation. It goes on and on and on, and the physical ramifications of trying to stand up for yourself. And so I often focus with people on having, like you said, those important people to focus on for yourself if you're feeling that inside you're struggling, and so that you can gain that sense of worthiness again, because that is one of the ways that we often are not aware of what's going on because our self-worth has been battered essentially in all these different directions. And so think of us like a golf ball where every indentation is all the things that keep happening, making a dint on us. And so it's a matter of, filling that back up and understanding that we are worth it and we do need to be kind to ourselves. And within that space, we always have a choice to believe in ourselves and to believe that it is possible. And if we repeat those abusive words to ourselves, I know that many years after I left my relationship, I wrote down 3 pages of words, labels that were used to call me other than my name. Wench. I mean, it would just, I won't even say a lot of them. I don't repeat a lot of them, but there were so many. And I tore that up and threw it in a friend's fireplace one day and said, enough. Because I realised that even years later, some of those words were repeating. And when we repeat that, we are reinforcing that message. And so it's about, like you said, creating a different internal environment, replacing those words with ones that we do believe in and that do build us up. I would also like your insight into, we've spoken about the grieving process of losing your baby. There is also a grieving process of losing a relationship, not only with yourself when you realise you've been abused and that you've lost some of that connection to yourself, but also when you do leave, losing that relationship itself, because there is a level of comfort in the known. How do you respond to that?
It was no different than, if someone had died, for sure, for me. There were 2 parts, and, and I think that you were referring to that earlier as well. And again, we'll refer back to what I'd written about forgiveness. Mm-hmm. As I was going through the abusive, the very immediate and very, very immediate and threatening abusive situation. And I don't want to minimize at all. There are definitely, practical things women or men have to do for their safety. So with all of that in mind, we're kind of talking now years out and how I rebuilt. One of the things I had decided early on was forgiveness. Mm-hmm. Even while I was going through it, I had recognized very early on, again, like I started this, that this is about me. It does not matter what he was doing or did. I was going to make that decision how I wanted to respond. And again, I go back to Dr. Frankl, between stimulus and response, you have that choice. There is that moment of choice. And I exercised that choice I had made a decision how I was going to act in this circumstance. I'd also made the decision that this was not going to take me down. And what that means then is that I am going to see life past it. It's kind of like a path, right? Like you're at this mountain pass and it feels like you cannot get to the other side, but you do know you have to keep going. And I knew I had to keep going, which meant then that I had to find a way to let go right then and there. And kind of say that while this may all be happening to me, I am choosing to forgive. I am choosing to make this part of my past, even as it was happening to me. And that's where, President Mandela's quote comes in. And I just kept looking for examples of people who had been through really difficult situations and come out, with their character stronger even than possibly when they had started, which many of them, tell us about in their own stories. And I kept thinking, if this man could stay in prison for 27 years and walk out and say, I forgive, and I let go, and I leave my anger, my hurt, my pain behind, then I can. And that's the approach I chose: forgiveness, kindness, and compassion. There's another part to it. it's very the easy way out, and there is no easy way out of abuse, but easier way out is to see the abuser as evil or different or but they're not.
No.
And it does not serve you to see them as different. It doesn't serve you to see them as separate. We're all human. Yeah. We all are. This human is having a base moment at this point. It could be you. There but for the grace of God go I. There but for the grace of God go I. And that's all I kept reminding myself, that even though he is doing all these things, and in that moment, it wasn't possible necessarily for me to remember the loving things he may have done in the past. And even that possibly wouldn't serve me, because I needed to remember some of it, because I'd just woken up and understood that this was abusive. But what does not serve us to rebuild our lives is to see anyone as separate from us. It just doesn't. We are inherently all the same. And what we have is that choice of how we want to respond to anything that happens in our life. And that's what I chose. During the whole process of getting out of that immediately physically difficult situation, moving on to safety, security, trying to figure those pieces out, going through the, very high conflict divorce, there was no time to think. I just had to keep navigating step after step. There were legal hurdles, financial hurdles, logistical hurdles, getting my kids to school. There was just so much to do. Yeah. So almost for about 2 years or so, I was just like a machine almost. Like the only way I could get through all of that was to sort of numb myself and kind of say that I will think about this later. I kind of, I channeled, I channel Scarlett O'Hara a lot in my life experiences, where I say, I'll think about this tomorrow, but for now I need to get through this. And, I did, I got through the practical challenges of all of it. And then it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. So there was a time, the divorce was announced and, the divorce itself was done. But when you have two children, the connection and the relationship, it has a different flavor. And it's a very unpleasant flavor now, co-parenting in these circumstances. But here I am. There is still grieving. I won't lie. There's just grieving for the hopes and dreams that were lost, the person you were, the person you could have been, had that path, really gone to a pleasant meadow, but it didn't, and it ended where it did. So there is all of that. And I come back again to that point that victim to thriver, it's not a linear process. It's not like you say, okay, I am, I've left this person and my life is going to be all roses and butterflies and daisies. It is not. There is, there are so many difficulties. I was this professional woman, but I was starting over again in so many ways. I'd taken such a big financial hit, just all of it. Like I was starting over on every front, hand me down furniture, my car breaks down. I've got to figure, there's just none of those. So your life changes in every way. And so at every juncture of those choices that you're going to have to make when you are with peers who are continuing on their path to the meadow. So then you have all these moments where you have to channel forgiveness, kindness, compassion, and you have to make the active choice that I am going to make the best of this moment where I am right now. And I'm going to choose the best version of me, even though there is a part of me that wants to feel sad or hopeless or feel pity for myself. There will be that part of you.
Yeah.
But it's not going to serve you. And it is okay. It is okay for that moment to feel, oh shit, I shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
I should be somewhere else, or life should, it is okay as long as it is a moment. But you are here and constantly thinking of somewhere else that you think you should be. It just doesn't help you.
Yeah.
And so moment by moment, as you grieve, as you get through, and as you keep stepping into that role of thriver, it's not a one and done thing. And the other thing I don't want anyone listening to think is, oh my gosh, this is never going to end, or that it's hopeless, or we're always going to have to be strong. We have been given this life. It is on us to make it meaningful. You get to define your strength. You can have your day of crying and taking care of yourself, or leaning on support. And that is one of the strongest things you can do in that moment. As long as moment by moment you honor the voice within you that's telling you to make the better choice, make the stronger choice, because it's not, to do what is best for you in that moment, it's a victory. It's fine. You taking care of yourself, if that means tears, laughter, whatever it looks like for you, you're fine. You're doing the right thing. And I think what I want to say, we all think that life is better over there as opposed to here. There is no there. Whether you are in an abusive situation, whether you are poor, whether it doesn't matter what your circumstance is. There is no there. Whether you are in an underdeveloped country, there is no there. If you don't make those moment by moment decisions where you are, in what you are, no matter what that is, life doesn't get better over there. If you just take your miserable self there, it's going to be miserable there.
Yeah,
so you have to work on yourself.
You do. That is so true. And all forms of adversity that we are affected by in our lives, we always have that choice. And it is no different to someone being born with a disability, someone having a serious car accident and surviving it with horrific injuries. It's about seeing that different perspective, choosing that you're going to make the most of your situation. And that is why some people who have very little material things can choose to be so happy. Yes. Some people who have lots of material things can still choose to be happy, but things themselves are not going to make you happy. And thinking those choices you've made in the past and holding on to perhaps the guilt or the shame or the confusion or whatever emotions and thoughts are attached to that, making the choice to hold on to those rather than to forgive and let them go and move forward in your life is one of those things that can really hold people back from understanding and stepping into their true potential. And one of the really pivotal moments that I went through in a recovery support group for domestic violence survivors, we were painting T-shirts of all things, and I didn't know what I wanted to paint on this T-shirt, and I'm watching other ladies painting all sorts of things, and I'm sitting there for about half an hour looking at this white T-shirt in front of me thinking, I don't know what I want to put on this. And then it came to me. I started writing words, and I wrote all the different types of abuse that were in that relationship. It started with sexual abuse and then financial abuse and emotional abuse. And I just listed all of these on this T-shirt. And I came to the realization in listing all of these things down that not only had I made my choice to start that relationship, knowing intuitively that I was ignoring that feeling inside that was telling me it wasn't quite right. knowing that I'd made the choice to leave that relationship despite what the consequences were going to be, but also knowing that he made the choice to treat me that way. And you so eloquently explain that it's in the choices, and not to not forgive, because I also did forgive. And for me, it was a very important moment to realize that I could forgive. That didn't mean forgetting, but I could leave it behind. I could remember what happened and I could share my experience with others, but to fully forgive and not hold that resentment and that anger was a very powerful realization. And so too, the realization that he chose to do those things, whether he was fully conscious of that or not.
Yes.
And that is such a full circle moment for someone who's gone through that sort of a relationship. And one of those realizations that does change your perspective. And when you're talking about, not having a linear path in the recovery, not having a linear path in how you then step through the fear and step through the uncertainty of your future, and to find that space where you are happy and comfortable with yourself, it is a journey. And it is so important to have people that, even if they don't fully understand, are there to lift up and support you. And that, again, is where trust comes in, being able to have someone that you can go to trust, to talk about what happened. It is so important and so much a part of that recovery process. So now we're a bit of time out of that relationship. What are you doing with your life now, Vina? How are you using these experiences to help other people and share your story and step into your own potential?
Thank you. I think when we're going through any difficulty in life, anything, it can be from losing your job to losing a child to being in an abusive situation, your sense of self-worth gets completely eroded. And you really start to feel like, am I ever going to get out of this? Do I have the strength to claw out of this? And my goal from my experiences has been to talk. I joke that it's kind of like, you see those weight loss pictures, here's the before and here's the after, and I talk about that middle. And I talk about how it feels to be in that middle and how it sucks and how you embrace the suck and you still get out we sometimes almost, we should ourselves to death. That we, I should have known better. I should have done things differently. I should have seen that coming, but you didn't.
Yeah.
And you're not gone. You're just you, and you're flawed and you're beautiful and you're perfect all at the same time, with those imperfections and with those mistakes. And so that's my mission, to show women that, to show them that they can still, because I still kept working through all of that. I ran businesses, started initiatives. I did all kinds of stuff through it. Again, not necessarily all beautiful, but it was done. Yeah. And that's what I want to show others, that it is possible, that you do get through it. You get to the other side and your children do thrive, but it's all because you have made choices and you've chosen to not, as you said, Vera, to not take responsibility for someone else's actions. Mm-hmm. But you can focus on your side of the street. You can focus on you. You can take responsibility for your own actions and your own choices. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing now.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to come back to the last little bit of that quote. It's a daily practice. It's not pretty and it need not be. And I don't care how you show up as long as you do. And Veena, you have shown up today so beautifully, so eloquently, and so courageously, for these are not topics that are easy to discuss. And I thank you for your trust in me, and that our viewers are going to get some very worthwhile content here to help them through navigating their own difficult challenges in life. And one question to sum this up: would you be the person you are today without having to go through all of that adversity?
Absolutely not. I would not. All of that has made me, and all of that is making you, whoever you are listening. And as long as you have breath in your body, you have a purpose, and you're here, and you will get through this, whatever it is you are dealing with.
You will, and you did, and I did, and our listeners will as well. Thank you so much, Veena.
Thank you, Vera.
I'd like to give you the opportunity to let people know how they can get in contact with you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Just message me directly on Facebook. I've sent, Vera has all the links. You can also reach me at infinitelycapable.com, and, just reach out if you just need somebody to listen to. I write, so read when you can and what you can. I also try to share pictures daily of things that inspire me, just because when you're going through real tough times, it's hard to read words. And so I try to share beautiful things, so it can just ordinary beautiful things, not Photoshop, nothing. Yeah. Just you and me. Yeah. And so that's where you can find me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
As long as you have breath in your body, you have purpose. You are here and you will get through this. What powerful words. Thank you so much, Veena, for a beautiful interview and such a wonderful insight into the ways that you have overcome your various adversities and help others to do the same.
Well, another story, more WhyMe moments, and more reasons to feel inspired to change your adversity into your advantage. An integral part of the vision of the WhyMe movement is the ICE acronym, I's for Inspire. When you feel inspired, you are more likely to take action. C is for two things, actually. Connection. You are not alone in this world. There are always people here who want to help you get through your adversity. and feel positive about your life and your purpose. It is also for courage. Courage, in my opinion, is feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And there lies the importance of connection. For sometimes we don't feel we have the courage to do things on our own. And yet once we have the emotional support of those people who we trust, it can help us to feel that fear and do it anyway. And lastly, the E is for empower. When we have that connection and the courage and the inspiration to know, get our clarity of purpose, well, that is when we feel empowered to take the action that we want to do to change some aspect of our lives for the better. If you would like my personal support in this area to help you get through adversity in your life, you can contact me at Vera-Lee Original on social media.